My life has been a whirlwind of emotional struggles lately, particularly because of my wife's actions. It all began when I was diagnosed with a serious liver infection, which could potentially become terminal if not treated. The trouble started about a year ago when I collapsed unexpectedly at work and was rushed to the emergency room. After undergoing numerous medical tests, I received the frightening news of my condition. At that time, my wife was away at a friend's wedding, and I chose not to tell her over the phone, fearing it would upset her. When she returned and saw me looking so ill, I had to explain everything. To my surprise, her reaction was far from what I had hoped for. Although she appeared shocked, the warmth and support I longed for were noticeably absent. Instead of exhibiting concern, she seemed more disappointed, as though my illness were a burden. This feeling left me with a heavy heart, making me wonder if somehow I had caused my own sickness. Regardless, I was determined to stay positive and focus on my recovery. Balancing my health and work proved very challenging. I was recommended to make significant lifestyle adjustments, including changes to my diet and exercise routine. Adhering to this new regimen while trying to maintain my work performance was difficult. During this period, I felt my wife beginning to drift away from me. She was no longer the supportive partner I had once known. Intimacy became scarce, as she often claimed fatigue or the need for me to rest. This behavior troubled me and led me to confront her about it. Her explanation was that she was stressed due to my illness, but I found it hard to believe. It felt like she was pushing me away rather than offering comfort. To cope with my emotional distress, I buried myself in work. As I became increasingly preoccupied, I neglected my diet and missed some medication doses. This decision eventually backfired, and I found myself severely ill once again, requiring another trip to the hospital. This time, my wife witnessed my struggles firsthand. She was more attentive during this hospital stay, as I remained there for an entire week. The doctor made it clear that I needed to prioritize my health and take a break from work, otherwise, my situation could deteriorate. However, taking a leave of absence was complicated for me. I am not an employee at just any corporate office. I work for a company founded by a close friend from college. I had turned down his initial offer to join when the company was just starting, but years later, when it became successful, I accepted a senior position. Since then, I have felt a personal responsibility for its growth and well-being. Despite the doctor's advice for rest, I attempted to return to work soon after a brief recovery. One day, while discussing my health situation with my doctor over the phone, my friend overheard the conversation. He was furious that I had not shared my health issues and was working so hard. He insisted that I take a break to focus on my recovery. In that moment, I felt conflicted. I informed him of my worries that I might not be able to work for long, which motivated me to secure my family's financial future before it was too late. I had not shared these concerns with anyone, even my wife, because I didn't want to create more stress. As I discussed my fears with my friend, he reassured me that he would take care of my family's financial needs if anything were to happen to me. His support brought me some comfort, though I was reluctant to lean on him too much. Despite my apprehensions, he insisted that taking a sabbatical from work was essential for my health and well-being. He firmly stated that I should take a 6-month sabbatical from my job, assuring me that it would come without any reduction in my salary. He even suggested that if I really wanted to, I could work from home occasionally during that period. After I got home, I informed my wife that I wouldn't be going to work the following day. However, before I could fully explain the situation to her, she immediately jumped to the conclusion that I had been fired. I gave her a sarcastic look and jokingly said yes, attributing it to my declining health. I thought this joke would lighten the mood, but her first response was a heartbreaking, "Are you dying?" I felt a pang of hurt. How could she seem so insensitive? I decided to play along with my prank and replied, "Yes." She then asked, "How long do you have?" I said, "I don't know, the doctor mentioned maybe 6 to 7 months, or perhaps even sooner." Instead of breaking down in tears as I anticipated, her reaction was unexpectedly cold. She expressed concern not for my health, but for our financial situation. "How will I manage?" she asked. "You don't have enough savings to support me. I've been saying for years that you should leave your friend's company and find a better paying job overseas. By now, we could have built enough wealth for me to live comfortably." At that moment, it became clear to me that her primary worry was not for my life but rather about being left in financial trouble. I wanted to reassure her about the equity I owned in the company, which could provide for her if something were to happen to me. However, I chose to hold back that information, curious to see how she would react next. I probably hadn't mentioned that when we reached our first significant milestone as a company, I had received a substantial equity stake. Today, that stake is worth approximately $1.1 million and is expected to grow even more as the company continues to expand. Since that conversation, my married life has gradually turned into a series of transactional interactions. Our discussions have become merely about logistics, and she no longer asks how I'm feeling. I see her leave for work in the morning and come back late in the evening, often opting to eat out rather than cooking at home. While she doesn't work a traditional full-time job, she does take on clients at a salon as a nail artist during busy times. All of this has been troubling, but I focused on my health instead of our crumbling relationship. Then, last month, she approached me with a question that shattered my already fragile world: when were we getting divorced? I felt crushed. Divorce was the last thing I wanted to deal with, especially in my current health condition. I was at a loss for words as she calmly explained that there was nothing shocking about her decision. She felt she needed to move on, and it was best for her to begin distancing herself from me. In a sarcastic tone, I asked if she had already found someone else to take my place. She confidently responded that yes, she had met a guy she had known for some time, and now she was seeing him as someone she could date seriously. The emotions I experienced that day are hard to fully articulate. A wave of despair washed over me, making it feel as though my marriage had been a facade. I talked to a friend about this, and he suggested that I remove her from my life. At this point, I didn't even want to refer to her as my wife anymore. She became simply Jay in my mind. I took the necessary steps to remove her as my legal nominee for the equity and everything else I owned. Jay was oblivious to the substantial equity stake I held, as I had planned to surprise her with that information when I retired. Had I disclosed it earlier, I suspect she would have revealed her true self motivated by monetary concerns. To add context, I had been diagnosed with a serious liver infection that could potentially become terminal if I didn't take proper care of myself. Thankfully, the doctors remain hopeful about my recovery if I stick to their prescribed medication, lifestyle changes, and adequate rest. Ironically, my attempt at a prank, posing as if my condition was terminal, ended up unraveling everything in my marriage. I later shared an update, expressing gratitude for the kind wishes I had received. It became clear to me that the lie about my supposed terminal illness revealed her true character. Before this, my entire life felt shrouded in deception. Without children and having lost my parents years ago, I found myself in a situation where everything I owned would have gone to her. Whatever possessions I had would have automatically gone to my wife, even as my health continued to decline. For the past year, I had been working tirelessly to earn enough money to secure a better future for her. It felt like a betrayal when she treated me so poorly in return. At first, I tried to ignore her attitude and concentrate on my own health. I took my doctor's advice and joined a fitness class, adhering to a strict diet, going for runs, and doing everything I could to feel better. Despite my efforts, my recovery wasn't progressing as I had hoped. I began to realize that my attempts to improve my well-being were often overshadowed by the mere sight of my wife. Every time I saw her getting ready for a night out, dressed up and looking glamorous, it would upset me. She would come home late, often drunk, with her makeup smudged, and we hardly spoke to each other. Occasionally, she would bring up the divorce, asking when it would be finalized, or she would make sarcastic comments about how many days I was adding to my life by sticking to my diet. I pretended not to be bothered by her remarks, but deep down, they hurt me. Instead of helping, her behavior was hindering my healing process, maybe even making it worse. Before all this upheaval, my life had been rather dull and routine, filled solely with work and my time with family, specifically my child, Jay. Now that both aspects of my life were slipping away, I felt lost and without purpose. A friend suggested that I move into the rooftop dwelling at our office. It was a simple one-bedroom setup with a cozy living area where my colleagues and I would unwind after work. I agreed to the move because I felt suffocated at home. Living at the office would provide me a needed distraction, allowing me to engage with my team and find some semblance of normalcy. After just a week living there, I noticed a significant improvement in how I felt. When I was moving out, Jay asked if this was a permanent decision. I explained that I was staying there until the divorce was finalized. After that, she didn't reach out to me. The only contact came when the divorce papers were delivered to her. She left a voicemail thanking me for making the separation easy and straightforward. The divorce process itself went smoothly, as I didn't have much to fight over. I had some assets, but my wife was unaware that the house we lived in was on a 10-year lease, with only 1.5 years remaining. I agreed to add her name to the lease, allowing her to live there without paying rent for the remainder of the term. I was upfront about my limited savings, explaining that I needed what little money I had to handle my medical expenses and living costs. With all of that squared away, I focused on eating well and attending my fitness classes regularly. I also began participating in essential work calls from my apartment to keep myself occupied. Recently, my health diagnosis showed positive signs of improvement, filling me with happiness. I no longer held the fear that my time was limited, despite the medication I was taking. Instead, I felt a renewed sense of hope and looked forward to a brighter future. I plan to update everyone on any new developments soon. In my next update, I thanked everyone for checking in on me. As I had mentioned before, my divorce was finalized and I allowed my ex-wife to continue living in our home until the lease expired. After that period, I cleared out the rooftop apartment and took only the essentials with me, placing the rest in storage. When I returned to collect my belongings, I found that Jay's new boyfriend had moved in with her. He approached me with an awkward expression and expressed his condolences about my illness. I simply smiled in response and told him I wasn't sure how much time I had left, maybe just a few more months. Seeing my wife's boyfriend didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. Perhaps I had finally moved on, or maybe I just felt a sense of satisfaction knowing I had freed myself from the burden of my freeloading wife. In terms of my health, I was feeling much better than before. I was more involved in my work than I had been in the past. Living at the office building turned out to be a significant improvement in my life. With my health stabilizing, I intended to liquidate part of my equity to help me rebuild my life. I started looking for a new house to settle into, marking over 5 months since I had begun this new chapter. I have been living in an office building for some time now. My friend keeps telling me that I can stay as long as I want, but I feel uncomfortable taking advantage of his kindness. During this period, I received an unexpected text from a number I didn't recognize. The person introduced herself as AP's wife and asked to meet with me. I agreed to the meeting out of curiosity. When we met, she seemed concerned about my health and expressed surprise that I didn't look like someone who was suffering from a terminal illness. I smiled and asked her what else she knew about me and why she wanted to meet. She revealed that her husband had been having an affair with Jay for more than 2 years, but they had kept it a secret. After my health issues became known and my wife got the house, AP told his wife about the affair, left her, and moved in with me. I was taken aback. Jay knew that the house was not owned but leased. It felt like she was putting on a show by pretending to look for another man because of my illness, but in reality, she had been unfaithful for a long time. AP's wife was extremely upset. She believed that Jay had lured her husband into the affair, especially since AP had come into a significant sum of money from an inheritance 2 years ago. AP looked much older than both of us, likely in his late 50s, and they had grown children. Despite the betrayal, she was open to reconciling with her husband if Jay would leave him alone. She came to me seeking help with this situation. I asked her if she was certain about wanting to reconcile, given that AP had been unfaithful for 2 years. She affirmed her choice, stating that she didn't want a broken family. They had plans to retire together, and the thought of living alone at her age was unbearable. I respected her decision, realizing it was her life and her choice to get back together with her cheating husband. They had not finalized their divorce yet. I shared some information about my health, and to my surprise, she was delighted to hear that I was recovering. She asked me about my future plans, and I mentioned that I hoped to have my own place soon. That's when I disclosed that the house where Jay and AP were living was not owned but leased for another 1.5 years. Her face lit up with this revelation, and I could sense she had an idea in mind. She thanked me and left. The following morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with numerous calls and messages from Jay. In several voice notes, she expressed panic, questioning why I had lied about my health and why I hadn't informed her about my recovery. She accused me of cheating by withholding the truth about the lease. Listening to her frantic messages was oddly amusing. Later that day, Jay came to my office. I saw her waiting through the conference room window, but I instructed the receptionist to have her wait for a couple of hours. I know it sounds cruel, but I took pleasure in seeing her anxious. Not long ago, I had been filled with anxiety, watching her prepare for dates and return home late at night, intoxicated. When she finally entered my office, she stormed in and yelled at me, repeating the same accusations from her voicemails. I absorbed every word, even finding some enjoyment in her anger, which seemed to stem from her own misery. I smirked and casually asked her how long she had been unfaithful. She fell silent, attempting to lie that it had only begun after my illness. I gave her a look that made it clear I knew the truth. I pressed her to confess everything. I told her I was aware of the affair with AP that had lasted for 2 years and questioned if she had been with me just for financial reasons. She insisted that their relationship was just a casual friendship that meant nothing, claiming that it was only after learning about my condition that she slept with AP. I was stunned. This is how she chose to act while her husband was gravely ill. She continued to deny the truth, so I insisted she come clean. Eventually, she broke down, crying and begging to get back together. She revealed that she had no substantial savings. When she discovered that AP had inherited $1 million, she sought him out. However, AP wasn't willing to leave his wife until Jay proved that she was worth it, and not just a gold digger. To win his affection, she had planned to offer the house to AP if he would leave his wife and marry her. It became clear that she intended to deceive him as well, but luckily, AP's wife found out about my existence first. AP's wife unexpectedly walked into my life and dropped a shocking truth bomb right when I least expected it. As the weight of her words sank in, I managed to keep a smile on my face and calmly asked her to leave. She then suggested that we meet up for dinner, perhaps hoping to mend things, but I stood firm and denied her request. With an air of misplaced confidence, she insisted that now that everything was cleared up, we should get back together and restart our lives. She claimed there were no longer any complaints from me, which felt like a desperate attempt to rewrite our history. When she started shedding tears, trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage, it became clear to me that she had forgotten a significant point: she was no longer my wife, and I had no intention of giving in to her demands. I reiterated my request for her to leave, emphasizing that if she did not comply, I would be forced to call security. There is a unique sense of fulfillment that comes from witnessing the defeated expression on the face of someone who has betrayed you. As I look ahead, I plan to update everyone on my progress as I transition into my new life. In a recent update, I am thrilled to share that I have received the results of my latest medical examination, which indicate that I have completely healed from my previous health issues. Since my diagnosis of liver disease, I've managed to lose around 25 pounds, a change largely attributed to a healthier lifestyle. In the past, I was so focused on making money for my family and my ex-wife that I neglected my own well-being, only to find that my efforts were futile. She divorced me as soon as she learned of my illness. In my last update, I mentioned an incident where Jay, someone from my past, had come to my workplace seeking another chance. However, the situation took a different turn when AP's wife went directly to him after our meeting, informing him that Jay was merely using him for his money. Until that point, AP had been defending Jay, primarily because she had allowed him to stay in her home. However, when it came to light that the house was leased and she would soon be completely dependent on him, AP felt betrayed by Jay's deception. AP's wife was determined to prevent Jay from accessing AP's inheritance money since she believed it was meant for her children. Ultimately, she succeeded in removing Jay from AP's life, but I remain uncertain about the dynamics within AP's family. AP's wife used to keep in touch with me, providing updates, but communication has since ceased. Whenever I inquired about her decision to forgive her husband's infidelity, she became evasive about discussing personal matters, prompting me to refrain from asking further. While my ex-wife has tried various means to reconcile with me, such as sending texts, emails, and calls, her efforts became overwhelming, leading me to block her on all communication platforms. When she learned I was making plans to find my own place, she showed up at my office unannounced, sending me flowers and gifts. It is worth noting that she does not have a job, and the lease on our previous home is about to expire. A neighbor informed me that Jay had rented out one of the rooms in the house to a bachelor for over a year, with the rent covering her other expenses. It raises questions about how she is managing to survive financially. Perhaps she is resorting to questionable means to support herself. Reflecting on my journey, I truly believe that everything happens for a reason, often a good one. My health has improved significantly, and I have successfully purchased a small 2-bedroom penthouse. Although it is modest, I have decorated it to my taste and couldn't be happier with my new living space. Friends and family have encouraged me to enter the dating world again, suggesting that I start meeting new people. While I am aware of the modern dating platforms being recommended, I haven't yet taken the plunge. Some of my younger coworkers advocate for social media specifically tailored for individuals aged 45 and older who are restarting their lives, and I have downloaded an app but lack confidence about diving into this new dating scene. Concerns about potential scams on these platforms have made me hesitant. I simply do not want to find myself entangled in another messy situation. I welcome any tips or suggestions that might ease my transition into dating once more. I'm grateful for the ongoing support and advice from my friends and family. Moving on to another story, I discovered that my wife went on a honeymoon with her affair partner soon after our marriage. I confronted them at her workplace, exposing the truth about their relationship. I am a 29-year-old male who recently relocated to a new city, and it was during one of those nights, while exploring my new surroundings, that I met my wife. Our relationship blossomed over the course of a year before we tied the knot. Shortly after we began our relationship, the early days of our marriage resembled what many might consider typical. It was a time filled with joy, excitement, and a deep admiration for one another. We relished every moment together, wanting to soak up as much time in each other's company as possible. However, even amidst the bliss, certain warning signs began to surface, hinting that not everything was as perfect as it appeared. During our courtship, my wife had a high-paying job that offered numerous perks and benefits, many of which naturally extended to me, simply for being her husband. She introduced me to her boss, and they seemed to get along quite well. I had to take on the role of the supportive husband, especially because her job often required her to travel to different states for meetings. Initially, I thought little of her travels since they typically involved her team going together with their boss. I never voiced any complaints until a particular incident occurred about 2 weeks after our wedding. My wife mentioned another upcoming business trip with her boss, and given that we were still in the honeymoon phase, I believed it would be more appropriate to spend that time together instead of apart. I expressed my feelings to her and tried to persuade her not to go, but our conversation quickly escalated into an unexpected argument. This was the first time we had ever fought, and she labeled me as unreasonable, which led me to question the nature of these business trips. Despite my feelings, she went ahead with the trip, seemingly ignoring my concerns. Distraught and confused, I sought advice from my friends. They all expressed similar doubts, suggesting that something was amiss in our relationship. This only fueled my curiosity, but there was little I could do except wait for her to return, as trying to discuss it at that moment seemed pointless. When she returned a week later, I tried to play it cool, not wanting to raise any suspicion. However, I felt compelled to uncover the truth and attempted to unlock her phone while she slept. My efforts were in vain as she had changed her passcode. Undeterred, I kept a close watch on her actions in the days following her return, eventually managing to observe her input her passcode. When I finally got hold of her phone, I was completely unprepared for the shocking discoveries that awaited me. To my horror, I realized that she had renamed her boss in her contact list to a woman's name. Still, I was able to connect the dots based on the content of their conversations and the numerous explicit photos exchanged between them. The realization struck me like a lightning bolt: my wife had been unfaithful. The so-called business trip was nothing more than her true honeymoon. I recalled her actual words in a chat with her boss, which made it clear that our marriage had been a cover for their affair. I felt utterly betrayed, realizing that the perks she received from her boss were not due to her hard work but because of their relationship. It was devastating. How could I have been so blind? But when you are in love, especially in the early days of a marriage filled with dreams and hopes, it's hard to see clearly. In an attempt to gather evidence, I took screenshots of their conversations and sent them to my phone, deleting any trace of the information from her device afterward. Perhaps it was my anger that fueled my next decision, but I felt a burning need to take action. Despite her betrayal, I wasn't proud of what I did. I took my wife's computer and altered her presentation that was scheduled for the next morning. I inserted an intimate photo of her and her boss into the second slide while leaving the rest of the presentation untouched. As expected, she went to work the next day unaware of what I had done. About an hour later, I received a frantic call from her. She had completed the presentation, revealing the scandalous photo in front of everyone. I could hear the panic in her voice as she accused me of ruining her life and destroying her career. What followed was a scene filled with chaos as she returned home furious and attempted to lash out at me. To de-escalate the situation, I asked her to leave, hoping it would prevent further confrontation. She refused, which prompted me to call her cousin, who lived nearby, to help mediate. After explaining the situation to her cousin, she arrived and managed to take my wife away, who was still screaming and demanding answers. All I wanted at that moment was to find some peace in the turmoil that had consumed our lives. I was searching for peace of mind. There was a sense of relief in realizing how she felt, as I genuinely believed she deserved to find happiness, even if not with me. I recently filed for an annulment of our marriage, which lasted less than a month. I have no desire to be connected to her in any way moving forward. Fortunately, I expect to come out of this situation relatively unscathed, aside from the significant emotional distress I experienced. My wife, who does not truly embody the meaning of that title, seemed to be trying to return to her boss, but he had no interest in rekindling anything with her. Instead, he chose to prioritize his family. As a result, she has become increasingly unhappy and is now a mere shadow of her former self, grappling with depression. I can't help but wonder if it was worth it for her to betray a good man, throwing our marriage under the bus despite the time, emotions, and money I invested in it. All of that seemed meaningless in the end. I felt utterly betrayed, used, heartbroken, and incredibly sad about the time lost that I will never regain. In reflecting on everything that has happened, I have decided to learn from these experiences. I plan to take things one day at a time as I await the finalization of the annulment.